Hey guys, I've been waiting for this day for years, and I finally decided it is time that I share my journey with OCD as a Christian. I have my mantra, and I decided that this is just gonna be super raw and real. I did not take a whole lot of time to plan out every single thought and every single thing because I just want to be very comfortable to share my experience. So put this on while you're washing dishes or grab yourself some popcorn or dinner and enjoy the story. Okay, so first off, I want to start with a definition. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, obsessive compulsive disorder is a disorder marked by uncontrollable and reoccurring thoughts, which are obsessions, repetitive and excessive behaviors, which are compulsions, or both. Ultimately, you feel driven to do compulsive acts to ease your stress. Even if you try to ignore or get rid of bothersome thoughts or urges, they keep coming back. This leads you to act based on ritual, and this is the vicious cycle of OCD. So essentially, OCD starts with these unwanted, distressful thoughts. Let's just throw one out that is a pretty common one, is what if I hit someone while I was driving? So there's that thought, and then it becomes an obsession. You can't stop thinking about it. Your mind cannot get rid of it. And it causes you so much fear and distress. And then in order to ease the stress and the fear, you do a compulsion. So the compulsion might be turning around on the road and checking to make sure that you didn't run anybody over. Now, in that moment, that compulsion eases the obsession. You feel relief. Okay, I don't feel stress and anxiety anymore. We're good. But all that does is feeds into the OCD cycle. So it's obsessions, it's compulsions, and then the more that you feed the obsessions with those compulsions, the more that you're feeding that cycle. Essentially, OCD latches onto anything that you care deeply about. So here are some themes that it can latch onto. Harm OCD, sexual orientation OCD, religious OCD, also known as scrupulosity, contamination OCD, relationship OCD. At the end of the day, OCD can latch onto anything that you care deeply about, and it is a debilitating disease. It is not a quirky personality trait. I'm sure you've heard people say, I'm just so OCD. I just want everything to be perfect. That is not OCD. That is perfectionism, or that is something else, but that certainly is not OCD. OCD is so debilitating and destructive to your life. It is not something to take lightly or to joke around about. OCD is one of the biggest understudied and misdiagnosed mental health disorders out there. There's not a whole lot of research done on it. In the more recent years, there's been a lot more research, and it is also so misdiagnosed. Oftentimes, it is misdiagnosed as general anxiety disorder, or maybe like in the church, it will be misdiagnosed as a spirit of fear or anxiety, so you need to trust the Lord more. We'll get more into that later. It is also worth noting that OCD can range in severity from person to person. So in my opinion, I feel like OCD is I feel like a lot of people have OCD tendencies, even if they don't have OCD specifically. Because unfortunately we live in a fallen world, so there's a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety in our minds, and oftentimes it can take the route of being obsessive about it, but that doesn't mean that if somebody has an OCD tendency that they have OCD. So that's something to take into consideration as well. Also, one more thing is that OCD can be, I think often when we think of it, we can think of it as being a very physical thing. So we see people flicking on light bulbs 7 times or checking the stove, and that's a certain kind of OCD, but it can also be a mental compulsion as well. It can be on the inside as well, so doing a lot of like mental checks and a lot of ruminating, which is like going over the same thought over and over, trying to figure things out, trying to replay memories, and that is also OCD. So just because you don't see it on the outside in somebody does not mean that one of your loved ones doesn't have it or isn't struggling with it. So like I said, it is super understudied right now, so they're not exactly sure where the cause of it is even from, whether it is, from your genes or from your environment. They do right now, I believe, I might be wrong, but I think they believe that it's a combination of both, maybe the environment that you're raised in as well as passed on through your genes, but that's something they're still studying. They're also not so sure whether or not there's a cure necessarily for it. There's definitely a lot of gold-tested methods that have worked for a lot of people. I want to give a little preface as well, just give a little bit of background about my history with mental health or my view of it. I grew up in an amazing Christian home with amazing parents and just great theology, but we do live in a fallen world, and I feel like maybe I picked up on things that I heard people in churches saying or on social media saying. So I also during this time when I started struggling with mental health or with OCD was also around the time where okay, take me seriously, where liberals and right wing and left wing were super big on social media, and like feminism was getting super big. And I believe that's around the time when gay marriage was also legalized in the United States. And I listened to a lot of Ben Shapiro and all of that jazz. So all of that was going on. And in that camp and in the right wing camp, I feel like often mental health is very much looked down upon. Not only that, but in the left wing camp, self-love and mental health awareness was super big as well. And so me being young and 13 and not really knowing what was right or wrong, I just kind of associated mental health with liberals, as silly as that sounds. And so I did not have a good view of mental health whatsoever. I thought that mental health wasn't a real thing, and if it was anything, it was probably just of the devil, all of these things. So that's kind of where I was at in that time period when I started struggling with OCD. So that gives you a bit of an understanding about how I was equipped to handle things or how I was not equipped to handle things, how my worldview was affecting the way that my mind worked as well. Okay, now that we've gotten that all cleared up, shall we start with the story? Shall we go on a little journey to 7 years ago in, I believe it was October of 2018. I'm not going to go into super detail about this specific incident, and I will try to remember everything. Mind you, this was a whole 7 years of struggle, so there's going to be a lot of things that I've either forgotten or won't add because, I've probably forgotten it, but I'm considering maybe doing some sort of part 2 or something. We'll see how this video turns out. We'll see how much I can remember, but yes, this will be a very raw and messy and hopefully organized enough video. But like I said, just stick on your earphones, go for a walk, go for a drive, do the dishes, and enjoy. All right, so 7 years ago, there was this sin that I had in my life. And one day, as I was doing my quiet time with God, I was hit with this immense fear and this loud voice that was telling me I had to confess this specific sin to my mom. It felt like it was the right thing to do because it seemed like that was a holy thing, but it was the most fear I'd ever experienced in my life, and there was nothing that would change that voice. I would argue with it. I would say, okay, well, maybe I can confess it, but maybe I could confess it to my sister or to, a friend. But that voice, there was no arguing with that voice. I had to confess it to my mom, and I had to do it the perfect way. So I was tormented. I was literally tormented with those thoughts for weeks until I did it, maybe a week. But going back to that day that initial thought came, after that initial thought came, I will say that as depressing and as sad as it sounds, my mind was forever ruined after that day. I have never thought the same, and I know that my mind is slowly healing, but it was from that day on forward that my mind was ruined. So anyway, I'm gonna glaze over a lot of details just so that we don't have to spend a lot of time on this one specific topic, but I eventually, confessed it, and then immediately the thoughts right after said, you didn't do it good enough. You didn't do it right. You have to do it again. So I was under this confession thing for probably a few months. It was the worst few years of my life. It was horrible, torment, and I was mixing it up with God's voice because I thought it was God. It was so long, it was so loud, it was so strong that I thought it was God's voice. And so anytime I would try to spend time with God, I immediately was met with so much guilt, and I felt like I couldn't spend time with him until I obeyed what I thought was him. So I had to go listen to all of these voices that were in my head, and I had to obey him. So it was really weird dynamic because I thought it was God, but then I also thought it was the devil. Let me try to explain where I was at with that. It felt like the conviction to do this thing was God, but then the fear behind it I thought was the devil. So immediately whenever this fear came, I immediately was like, okay, like this must be Satan, so I would do all the prayer and everything. And from that day on, because of OCD, my relationship with God was ruined. And it's gotten better, don't worry. Hate to spoil it for ya, I know. But it made it so hard for me to seek God because every time I tried to go to him, all I heard were these voices of fear, was condemnation, accusation. I have to go confess this. If I don't, I'm sinning, I'm disobeying God. So it was that constant friction. And when I wanted to spend time with God, I wouldn't ever receive his love. I would not ever receive his sweet voice as a friend, as a father. It was more so just him as a judge, as a fearful leader, or what I thought was him. And that was horrible. That went on for years. I just could not experience God's presence anymore. I tried so hard. I sought, and I just could not experience his presence. I will say, as years went on, I sought God so much, day and night. I was so persistent. I was so faithful to him. And I just prayed that he would take whatever it was I was going through away. I didn't know what it was at the time. I didn't know it was OCD. So I was so confused. I thought the problem was whatever my mind was obsessing over. And so I begged God day and night to help me, just to be there for me. And yet it felt like he wasn't. It felt like he was literally nowhere to be found. And that really crippled my faith in God. And I know people often say, well, just hold on, like he's going to work in your life. He's doing it. Even if you don't feel it, he's there. It was 7 years. 7 years of nonstop tormenting thoughts that would send me into a spiral every single second of the day. My mind was constantly filled with anxiety, and I thought it was anxiety. I thought it was fear. So I thought I just needed to cast out the spirit of fear. I thought I needed just to pray against it. When it wasn't working, why is it not working? When worship isn't working, why is worship not working? When Bible time is just making it worse, why? What's wrong with me? Why am I a bad Christian? Why does prayer and Bible time and worship and sermons work for every single other Christian and yet not for me? And I didn't realize it was because of OCD and not because of God, if that makes sense. So it's been I feel like I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but it's been a very long journey of trying to disassociate OCD from who God is. It's taken a lot of time, but we're getting there. I am so happy to say that I feel like I'm on the upward journey, and I feel like I can see more light than I've ever seen before. And it's been a long time. And let me tell you, I still struggle so much. I still have really tough days with OCD, and I'm still down here when I would want to be up here, but I used to be you can't see it, I used to be way down here. And I've come so far, and I'm so thankful. Anyway, I'm jumping way ahead of this story. Where were we? We're still in 2018. Right now it's 2025. Let's rewind a little bit. So I did share a little bit about how, it ruined my relationship with God. So along those lines, one second. Along those lines, as I was going through this literally daily torment, every single second of every single day, my mind was filled with tormenting thoughts. And when I say torment, I know maybe it sounds extreme, but it's because it was extreme. I kid you not, I was going through hell every single day, and it was all on the inside. I didn't know what was going on. I was seeking God. I got no answers. It was horrible. So around that same time, maybe, I want to say beginning of 2019. Also, sorry, I'm sick. I remember where I was when this happened. I was looking out on our yard, on our deck, and just going through all these thoughts. And I was hit with this really loud thought, super loud. How do I know if I'm saved? What if I'm not actually a Christian? what if I'm not actually saved? And it was that day that started that 6-year-long journey of still struggling with that idea. So that was a thought I had struggled with for so long, and I kept researching and asking people and repenting and re-asking God, but I never had this big moment, so I didn't know if it was real. And yet nothing ever satisfied that obsession, that thought. Nothing ever satisfied that. I was constantly in a place of, am I not? Okay, let me pray. Okay, I feel a little bit better. Oh, no, now I don't. Am I sure? It's really what OCD is you're playing tennis or pickleball with the thought. So it pitches this thought that says you're not saved. You go into the court and you say, maybe you're right. Maybe I have to pray again. And that's whenever you throw that ball back. And then you feel a little bit better. You're like, oh, I made it onto the other side of the court. But then it takes its paddle and it says, that prayer wasn't good enough. Are you sure you didn't feel anything? It throws it back into your court. And what you're doing right there is you're going back and forth, and nothing will ever ease that. Like I said, there's a lot of themes when it comes to OCD. So the one I was struggling with at that time was obviously religious OCD, scrupulosity, and a lot of confessing and compulsively apologizing. I felt like everything was a sin, and I no longer did anything that I enjoyed because I felt like it was wrong or a sin, to do something that I enjoyed. So I remember even there was this period in my life where I could only listen to Christian music. I would be in so much limbo over whether or not I could listen to a Disney musical song like Let It Go from Frozen. I really wanted to, but I felt like it was such a sin if I did, because these thoughts were telling me that it was. And obviously, if I'm having thoughts, it must be God, right? Or the devil. There's no other option, right? Newsflash, there is. OCD targets anything that's important to you in your life at that moment. And it really will target anything. So another area that it targeted me in was my eating habits. I don't remember exactly what year this was in. I want to say 2020. Yeah, it was 2020. It was when I was living in California. I remember feeling so guilty for eating. I remember feeling like if I ate one more spoonful of food, then I was disobeying the Holy Spirit and I was never going to be forgiven. So anytime I had that thought, I had to stop eating completely. So it came to the point where I only ate one meal a day and then nuts during the day. And it wasn't, this eating disorder I wanted to be skinny or whatever. It was this eating disorder in the sense of if I ate one more thing, I would be sinning and going to hell. So it was around that time that I think I ended up losing probably 30 pounds. Just a little side note, I've made it my new thing, or I don't know, this is something I've been working on for a while now, is to not comment on people's appearance. Obviously we all know not to do it if somebody, obviously we know not to bully somebody, but another way that I think it's really unhealthy is by telling somebody, wow, you look like you've been losing a lot of weight, you look so great, because you really never know the reason for somebody's weight loss. So just be really careful about that. Around the same time period is whenever I started struggling with this feeling or again obsession that I had to share the gospel with certain people. And again, it was this obsessive thing that I had to do, or else I was disobeying God, or what I thought was God. So it was always whoever I didn't want to share it with the most is the one that I knew that was what God was telling me to do. So that was really distressing as well. And that was the first time I think I had really kind of opened up to my mom about all of what was going on, but I didn't still know the severity of what it was, or really even what it was at all. I just know I was under a lot of distress. And so I remember just before I was about to go do it, or share it with somebody, I went to my mom and I just felt so distressed, and I just opened up to her and just to the best of my ability, and she was really just there for me, and it was so encouraging, and she really listened to me and she prayed with me, and I actually didn't end up doing that compulsion. So I feel like my mom kind of saved me from that in that moment, which was just such a sweet moment, having that connection. But yeah, still At that time, I didn't know what this was, so I wasn't even able to target it because I didn't know what the issue was. So then fast forward to maybe a year or so, obviously there's still stuff going on in between that. I'm just kind of sharing with you guys the like big themes that I had to kind of give you guys a glimpse of what was going on. So yeah, fast forward to about a year, I had I think one of my first panic attacks ever. And it wasn't, I think it was a panic attack. I'm not sure exactly what it would be qualified as. And it wasn't because of anything that was going on mentally. It just kind of came on. It was a physical thing. So I don't know if it would be considered a panic attack or an anxiety attack. I'm not sure which is which. But anyway, I just remember like having a really hard time breathing, and we were in the car driving, and I just felt like I was gonna die in that moment. Like my thoughts were so racing because of that. And I just remember having this really debilitating fear that if I died in that moment, I was going to hell. And so that was so horribly distressing. And I remember not going, I think it was that night or like the night after that I was so traumatized by that I didn't want to sleep in my room alone. So I went down to the couch and I did everything that I could not to fall asleep because I was so terrified that I would close my eyes and then wake up in hell. It was horrible. So yeah, for a few nights I slept on the couch because of that. And then another theme that was going on in between all of this was the harm OCD theme. So the fear of accidentally hurting somebody, whether that comes in the form of, oh no, there's water on the ground, so I have to wipe it up. It's my responsibility to wipe it up, or else somebody will slip and fall and it'll be my fault and I have to confess that it's my fault. You know, a lot of what OCD is taking on this false responsibility, and it's like you are responsible for everything and then you have to fix everything. It's this really big weight to carry. So yeah, or like if I am kind of mad at somebody and let's say I'm cooking in the kitchen and somebody's really annoying me, maybe they're in my way and I'm walking by with a knife, I have to watch the knife as I walk by and make sure that I don't accidentally stab them while I'm walking by because I'm angry at them. Sounds crazy, I know, but those were the thoughts that were going on in my mind. Yeah, so there was all of that going on as well. Then, my saving grace, I want to say this was in 2022 sometime. I remember coming across this video on YouTube that said something along the lines of, how do I know if I'm really saved? And this could have been a slippery slope for me because I remember I was always researching, and researching is no good. That's just a compulsion, so don't do that. And then I think in parentheses it said something like OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder, or something along the lines where I was like, oh, this is different. So I clicked on the video. It was by Mark DeJesus. And I was very wary still at this point about any of, like the self-help stuff because, oh, it's of the devil, is what I had thought. So I was very kind of weary, but I looked through his channel, and he is a pastor who started a YouTube channel, who had struggled with OCD for years, and now he's sharing his biblical yet psychological perspective on it. And let me just start off by saying it was really difficult for me because I think I so much focused on finding like a biblical perspective that it never actually focused on the fact that there was a mental side of it too, which is that there is like a such thing called OCD. But then obviously growing up, like I was super wary of the psychological side of it because, what if it's not true? What if it's anti-God? Whatever is, the rhetoric that was being spoken. So finding that was super refreshing, and his videos literally changed my life. And let me tell you, it was not an overnight thing, and it is still not an overnight thing. Everything, like healing in general, but healing specifically with OCD, is not linear. It is not a straight line. It is this, this, okay? Still to this day, this is probably like 3 years ago, to this day, I still have days that are just as bad as when I started, but the reality is that now I know what the issue is, and things are slowly getting better. It is a journey. It is so important to have the journey mindset. It is not going to be an overnight fix, and I had to let that idea go because all that's doing is setting me up for failure. So whenever I started embracing it like it was a journey and not an overnight destination, then I think that's whenever healing finally came, because I released this idea that I had to be fixed immediately, which, mind you, I will say messed me up a little bit because I think often in Christianity, it's kind of pushed that God is like, he'll fix your issues in a day, or like in this moment, all of your everything was gone and he took all my fears away. And so I think that's what I had struggled with a lot too, is growing up in the church, is I felt like I needed this encounter with God and then everything would be fixed. And so I had to throw that away and realize that God is a process God. He's a God that works in the process. And sure, some people might have these overnight encounters where all of their addictions, all their fears, everything is gone. But we do live in a world that was created with these flaws, and our minds are beautiful, amazing things that are also affected by this world. And so it takes time to unlearn thought processes. It takes time to grow and to heal from traumas. And OCD was traumatizing. And it takes time to heal from that, and that is okay. And God is so patient, and that's something I've been having to teach myself. Anyway, it was after finding his videos and his channel that I realized what the issue was. That it was not God, it was not a demon, it was OCD. And that changed everything for me. That changed the trajectory of my future, I feel like, because I was able then to realize, to identify thoughts. And a little side note on this is, I know often, again, in the church, there's this huge thing about not having your identity, or like not claiming certain things. We need to be super, super careful with that theology, because that can be really detrimental to a lot of people. And I know that was a little bit detrimental for me, because I was so scared of saying that something was an issue, or saying I had OCD, or else people would come to me and say, oh, don't say that, you're claiming it. But yeah, so I just wanted to point that out. There is so much healing in identifying the issue, and that's where I started finding healing, is whenever I was able to identify what the issue was. Now I want to say it was about 8 months later. Was it 8 months? It was the beginning of 2023 that obviously, so now I learned this thing. This is great and all. Obviously things are still going really rough, because that's just how life is. It takes so much time. But it was about the beginning of 2023 that my sister invited me to live with her in Virginia Beach. And that was one of the best years of my life, and that was the best thing that could have happened to me at that time, because it took me away from the place that I was really struggling a lot, and it put me into a new environment. And I had days where I was actually able for like 1 hour or for 2 hours to not have racing thoughts and to not have obsessions. I was able just to live. And that was so healing for me, because I'd never experienced that in years, because I was always so focused with fixing whatever thoughts I was having. But when I was living there, I was able just to have days where I could be free. But like I said, OCD unfortunately does not just go away. And so, sorry, the dog is barking. So there's something... Something I struggled with a lot was a new theme, which was called contamination OCD. So it was the fear of contaminating something with a disease, a chemical, something that would harm somebody else, and then again it would be my fault and somebody else could die because of me. So I would constantly have to wash my hands to make sure that I didn't spread any diseases and didn't hurt anybody. So like my hands would get so dry, and I remember sometimes having like red spots all over my hand because of how constantly I had to wash them. And then also had to do with glass too. Like if I was using a glass dish, I had to make sure I washed it every single time that I used it, even if, just in case there was little glass shards and it hurt somebody. So yeah, certain things like that are, again, like the obsessions, like what if I hurt somebody, and then the compulsions, which is having to do something about it. It just reinforces that cycle. Around the same time, the fear started, or the other theme started, of what if I run someone over while I'm driving? And so anytime I would hit a pothole or something, I would be so fearful that I hit somebody. And so I would have to turn back around. I remember there was this one time I was driving in the States on the huge highway, and I had to drive a whole hour, go through so many exits just to drive back again and look so closely. It was at night. I had to look so closely to see if, what if there was somebody, because I remember hitting a bump and I was like, oh my gosh, what if that was somebody? So just these certain things that really put you in so much distress. And I was sobbing on the way back, because I was like, I know that this is OCD, and yet it's so hard for me to not latch on to these compulsions and obsessions. But yet in that moment, there's so much grace, because there's going to be times where you mess up and where you're not going to be the way that you want to be. And when you know the answer and yet it's hard to follow through with it, and yet knowing that we're slowly getting there. Like, it takes time and that's okay. And I had so much grace for myself, but it was still so tough because these emotions are so real. It feels so true, and it's hard not to listen to it. Anyway, that went a lot quicker than I thought it would. I kind of thought I'd be filming for like 3 hours. I think there's a lot more I could share. There's so much. Again, 7 years worth of things. But I think it's good if I kind of just do a very basic overview and don't go so much in depth right now. I might end up doing more videos just about how, like, advice, or I don't know, more stories or something. But that's kind of all for today, I think. I have a lot of thoughts on this. It's something I'm super, super passionate about because I've been through it. I've been through the torment of it. So mental health is something that I stand so firmly about. And I know it's a topic that is not handled well in the church. So I'm very, very, very passionate about spreading awareness about that. And I have a lot of compassion for people who are going through it, and a lot of hopefully righteous anger toward people in the church who misspread information or misuse the word of God regarding mental health. I don't know, whatever it is. I have a lot of passion and a desire to spread awareness about it, and yeah, just a lot of compassion toward people who do struggle. So I think that's all. Okay, that was really easy. Yeah, I don't know what else to say except bye. Thank you for watching.